Are we live? We're good. Good evening, everyone. You've made it to Tuesday, February 10th, and virtually, I'm calling this meeting to order. Our roll call. I see Megan online. I see Peter online. It's great to see both of you. Joan is excused, and in person, we have Eileen and Angela and Kelly and Brandon and myself. We have one agenda item, which I'm very excited about, and we have a guest speaker. Karen, would you like to introduce our guest speaker?
I would love to, and I don't think Morgan probably needs any kind of introduction, but tonight, for those of you who may not have attended a training with Morgan before, we have the new title, Chief Transparency Counsel, from the Washington State Office of the Attorney General, Morgan Damerow, and he is going to walk us through some highlights of the Open Public Meetings Act, and we condensed this a little to focus in on some things we think that the council in particular might be most interested in. So this actually won't meet your requirement for open meetings training. You'll still need to do that, but this is going to be a great opportunity to have a discussion and real opportunity to ask questions and get into details that you might not otherwise have an opportunity to do, like when there's 70 people in a council chambers. And so anyway, Morgan, we're really glad to have you here.
No, thank you for inviting me back again. Last time I was here, last week was 70. The time before I was here before, it was close to that. So I'm okay with a smaller group. It's kind of nice to have this more of a conversational versus standing remotely. Want to start things going, and see if technology wants to agree with us tonight. Look at that, yeah. So as Karen was saying, I'm not going to go through everything having to do with the OPMA tonight. We really decided to kind of focus in on things you're going to be dealing with on hopefully on a day-to-day basis, because that can be problematic. But as you're doing your work as council members, and recognizing there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes in terms of agendas and getting those out and postings. Not going to spend a lot of time talking about this kind of procedural things. It's the bits and pieces that are really impacting you as you're doing your job as council members.
So Morgan, as you're going to do this, would you like council to wait, or would you like them as you're going through to ask questions?
I am told to interrupt me as we go along, ask questions. I think it's more entertaining, so to speak, more engaging for all of us versus, get 25 minutes in. What was my question again? And, please interrupt and whatnot. I'm going to talk a little bit about just the principal stuff, and then really kind of dig into those things that you need to know as council members doing your work. Of course, being the attorney, have to throw out the disclaimer. Take advantage of your attorney, ask those legal questions, get legal advice. This changes over time. We've seen it doesn't happen a lot with the OPMA as it does with the PRA. We've seen a couple of decisions come out of Eastern Washington recently that, weren't super surprising, quite honestly, but they emphasized things we already knew in terms of what you can do in executive sessions, things like that. So it doesn't hurt. That's why you have attorneys on, is to take advantage of their time and ask those questions. I'm not going to talk about the fact that it just won't satisfy the training, because we've covered that already. If you're up to your 4 years, that's the crucial number. There's an OPMA training on our website you can watch, and I will put the disclaimer out. The disclaimer, it's not that bad. How's that? It's possible. Yeah, I know. I really just I need to redo it. It's mine. It's my video, so I don't feel bad. It's just not. I'm not proud of it. It could be a lot better. It's okay. It gives me. It's not going to be a really bad Rotten Tomatoes thing, but it's not going to win awards either. Okay. So core principle wise, when we're talking about the OPMA, you really kind of have to keep track of, the reason we have this is so that people can stay informed about what you all are doing as council members. And so some of the decisions are, you're not quite sure what to do. You keep these principles in mind that, the whole idea behind the OPMA, how we got here in 1971 when it was amended, was to watch the process. In the prior version of the OPMA, the only thing people got to see was yes, no, that was it. And there was a revelation that really, it's interesting maybe, but it doesn't really inform people as to how you get from, hey, here's this really great idea, to, wow, that was the worst idea I ever had, let's not do that, kind of a thing. Or opposite, you move forward with it. And those discussions happen in public so people can see how it goes. I had a board member come and talk to me a while ago, and we're doing OPMA training, obviously, and he's telling me about, well, if we don't have these conversations before, if we don't kind of flesh these ideas out, when we get up on the dais or in these meetings, we look disorganized. And I'm like, that's the point. The point is, it's not supposed to be scripted. It's supposed to, people are supposed to see that you don't always agree, that you change your mind, why you don't, why when they share information, why you express, oh, this is why I think we should do this, those kinds of things. So it's not, it's that public exposure. When you get challenged on one of these things, if somebody thinks that you may have violated the OPMA, if you end up in court, it doesn't happen very often with the OPMA, and I hope you never get there for either case, PRA or OPMA. One of the guiding principles behind the OPMA is it's supposed to effectuate this purpose of transparency, and the courts are going to mean they're going to liberally construe that, which means that if they can get to a reasonable answer, within the framework of the OPMA, they're going to do that. They're going to say, this furthers the transparency issues. The flip side of that, the one time you can go out of public view for executive session, the courts are going to say, okay, so this is basically going into a closed room, we're going to construe that very tightly. If it says we're going in for this purpose, one of the allowed purposes, that's all you can do. And so it's one of those situations that liberal construction means the courts are going to hold you strictly accountable to exactly what's in the OPMA. They're not going to give you a lot of flex room. Say, well, we got it mostly right. Those kinds of things. So please don't bring that up. So when you're thinking about, what you're supposed to be doing, keeping these principles in mind when you're running through the rubrics of your decision making. Have this be one of your check boxes. Okay, what's the transparent option? Okay, maybe this is allowed because it's one of the exceptions for executive sessions, but have this be one of your decision points and whatnot. So when it comes to the basics, when it comes to the OPMA, all meetings of a public agency are open to the public. You have to have a governing body, a public agency. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about those tonight because obviously we're talking City of Tumwater, public agency. You are the governing body, so you qualify. Congratulations. The one thing you have to keep in mind is it could also be the committees and things like that. If you create a subcommittee with power to act on your behalf, they're taking testimony on your behalf. It's your work, but it also could be like planning commissions. That's a common one we have with cities and things like that. And so the OPMA can be required they should be required to comply with that as well.
Morgan, can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So when we are out and about at events, right, and we're always asking how many of us are going, why is that important?
Because of the quorum threshold. If there are a majority of you, and there are 7 council members,
Correct.
So if 4 of you are at the same meeting, you may be okay. Say you all decide to go, you all down at the Valley working out. Totally fine, you can do that. But if you're on the 4 treadmills that are right next to each other and you're talking agency business, congratulations, now you're double dipping, you're getting workout and you have a meeting because you're conducting agency business. So you go to a public event, something at South Puget Sound Community College, whatever it might be, you can go there, but if you start talking shop, there's the problem. There's an AG opinion talking about that specific issue. That's why you can go to training together, but at the same time, you can attend social functions. You just have to be really, really careful not to take on the business of the agency and say, and where it really becomes a problem is where you go to, let's say you go to like Waco, you go to one of their conferences and there's 4 of you there and one of the speakers presents on something and you have this natural inclination to say, oh, wow, that's really useful. We should do this and this. Oh, wait a second, we should not have that conversation. Mm-hmm. You can learn stuff, you just can't implement it until you start having that conversation in the public kind of arena. So you can go there, you just have to be really, really careful. You can be social and, and that kind of thing. You're lucky there's 7 of you. There are some cities where there are 3 board council members. Yeah, you run into each other at the grocery store. Congratulations, you may have a meeting because there's 2 of you if you cross the other threshold. We'll talk about those in a second.
We do have council subcommittees that are made up of 3 members. And so I think when it comes to committee business, potentially two council members do make up a quorum. So that's one of those things to be careful.
Yeah, exactly. And that comes down to, is it this body acting or is it the committee acting, the subcommittee? It's the quorum of that subcommittee. So if you had 3, then all of a sudden 2 is the threshold for your quorum. I already said the top part is a meeting is anytime you have action. I'm going to bounce ahead for a slide and then come back. Action is what I was talking about. It is that, talking shop. It's the deliberations, the testimony. It's all those things that go into you doing business, from the idea to the final point. Whether that's final action or consensus or whatnot, all of that changed in 1972, 71 when the OPMA was amended, to having all of that happen in the public eye. Including, of course, final action. Final action is exactly what it sounds like. It is that final vote, whether it happens by final vote or whether it happens just by consensus building. That's usually the one that's more difficult, particularly in executive sessions, because most executive sessions, and I say most because there may be one exception, I'm still not convinced of it, but always think about this is the rule. In executive session, you cannot make a final decision. So when you get to consensus building in executive session, you are approaching this line of that final action. Final action isn't just vote, it is, so are we in agreement here? Yeah, I think so, yeah, okay. That's why you've gotten to a resolution point, whether that's positive or negative. Those are the things you have to watch out. Secret ballots aren't allowed. People get to know how it is that you all vote as leaders of the agency. And people care. You're accountable to I think, yes, we should do this. I think no, and people get to, decide how they're going to vote next session next election based upon, your track history. That's part of what informs that kind of decision. I was talking to one agency, and I think with the best of intentions, they had an issue that they had to deal with. And so the council, the chair's idea was, well, I'm going to email them all and see how they vote. And then when they come back, when we get in the next regular meeting, then we'll announce it. And I'm like, okay, let's decompress that. So you're going to have a meeting outside and then come back and announce the meeting you just had in private, basically, is how that sounded. Exactly. It's like, oh my goodness, please don't. It was the best of intentions. They were trying to deal with an emergent issue. Right. The way to deal with that would have been, let's call a special meeting. And we'll talk about that for a second. So when it comes to being a meeting, this is the easy part. When your regularly scheduled meetings, your special meetings, it happens here in the Tumwater City Hall. It doesn't necessarily have to happen that way. Meetings have happened via email. They can happen on social media. It's really about the function, about what's going on, and not necessarily about the room that you sit in, which is why, my best advice for social media is don't friend each other in terms of, because it creates that opportunity. If you're outside this, or make sure on your social media, keep it to your personal stuff. Whatever you do in your personal life, don't mix your politics with your social media account. As best you can. Good luck. I recognize that's tough. But you always have to be diligent, or when you see a comment from one of the, say you are friends with each other on whatever social media, you follow each other, somebody posts something, and then you post something, and then you post something else, and you post something else about that issue having to do with city business. If you're talking about, whether, I don't know, would be do you think the Seahawks game came out well? That's probably a safe one right now. And so everybody should say yes, by the way. And so if that would be something safe to talk about versus you could all vote yes on that on social media. Nobody is going to get upset about that one, except maybe somebody back east. But versus if you start talking about agency business and social media and commenting to each other, it looks like deliberations. So you always have to be watching for that.
Morgan, can we go a little bit into email? Because I'm just wondering, other smaller committees, public, health and safety, general government, public works, if a member of that committee has an agenda item, is that what are we doing? I know Angela has a lot of ideas for public health and safety. Does council then send it to a staff person or Paul, and then Paul then disseminates it? Right, so we don't get a rolling meeting, right?
Exactly, you're right, because if you propose an idea, and then Kelly, you have something you want to add to it, and then Lilia, you have, oh, wait, and we should, and Eileen, then you add, wait a second, now we just had a meeting via email, and that's completely possible. So my best advice is, send it to the clerk, send it to Paul, have them work as the facilitator. So
it doesn't allow us to reply back, because I find myself right? Yeah. So if we don't reply back, then we don't fall into...
On a whole separate world, the worst thing that ever happened to email was respond all. It's just no good comes from respond all.
When we send it out, we always do BCC, so then they can reply to me or Kelly Adams will send something out. Like,
Not
we're
to each other.
And that's the next best option is the organization show things, BCC it.
Okay.
What you have to watch out for is, the server is a wheelhead meeting where instead of you become the email, you become the social media server and you start pushing information back and forth. So you need to be careful with it. But yeah, that'd be, first is just, all come centrally and pushed out for the agenda. Second is work through you, Paul, or somebody like that, just to break the communication chains. And that way you can kind of have your foot on the brake, like, oh, wait a second, we're getting too much out here. We're getting too close to having this looking like this running conversation when it comes to these kinds of things.
So if I have an agenda idea,
Yeah.
I can call Kelly or I can call Eileen, say, hey, I have this agenda idea. And then one of us can say, hey, Paul, we're interested in this agenda idea. Can you add that to the calendar? Is that having a meeting?
That's, you've identified 3 people. I just still haven't I have talked with my.
Unless it's a committee agenda.
And we're on the same committee.
Yeah, it's just, best practice would just be to go directly to staff,
Okay.
who can then add that to an agenda.
You
Alright.
always have to pay attention to the size of the committee or the group. Then, council is 7, so 4 is the threshold. If it's 3, then 2, you can't talk
Okay.
without crossing that line.
Another option, sorry
No,
to
go ahead.
interrupt. Another option is we, on most of our meetings, have other items. And under that item, you can say, I have an item that I would like to put on a future agenda. And then you can get a short conversation about whether or not your seatmates are
Okay.
on board with putting that on an agenda. Not have the discussion about the item there, but about scheduling.
I like that idea. We don't really utilize additional, what do you think about trying that? Because if Angela has an idea for public health and safety, she's chair of general government, you can reach out to Kelly Von Holtz for public health and safety. You can't talk to Eileen because Eileen is on,
General
public works.
government, yeah,
Public
public
works
works
with
with me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is a great, some people do exactly that. That way you can talk about, and government's supposed to move slowly, it's supposed to move pragmatically, so that fits within that general model. Sometimes you have to move more quickly because you have an emergent issue, but generally it's not. People don't expect, like, boom, done. It's so.
It's not like the
yeah,
military.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
modify that, Melody, I'm thinking of you, where we say additional items, you say, or future, like, 3 months, or future agenda items. Like, that's the place to do it then. So then you're all in the meeting and go, hey, I have this idea. So you're not violating, you're not using email, you're doing it in a public setting. What do you think about that? Eileen, you're thinking.
Well, I have 2 questions, 2 thoughts there, because one, we've had a verbal conversation, so is that an open meeting? When you have a verbal because nothing's written, so she could call me, and we chat about all kinds, like my trip to Hawaii, and then we talk about something that she wants to put on an agenda, so how's that a violation? So.
Shift away, totally fine. Hope you had a good time. But when if it's a committee of 3, then if the 2 of you are talking about an agenda,
Right.
yeah, there's a problem there. If it's,
Even talking,
yeah, it's not just writing.
And
Meeting
if
is,
she's the chair, it's still a problem.
It's
Because
still-
she sets the agenda with staff.
Yes, because if staff has a list, then staff can have that conversation with the chair about scheduling.
there is a weird kind of dynamic there. If the conversation is, hey, can you add this agenda item in, and that's it, then you're literally putting something on the agenda to talk about. But
not the pros and
But not
cons.
the pros and cons. Say, hey, I'd like to add this item. That one wouldn't concern me because if somebody challenged you, it's like, you'd be, yeah, I called Eileen and this was the conversation. Hey, would you please add this agenda item so we can have this on the meeting?
Okay.
That demonstrates compliance,
All right.
actually. But you gotta resist the next step. And I think it's really important because, or those kinds of things which you have to avoid. Better choice is to work through, the clerk, just to break that communication.
she has lots of ideas, seriously.
Well, and the other issue too is, so maybe you had a phone conversation, but then Eileen emails Kelly to say, heads up, we're thinking about having this conversation, whatever it is, you know,
And then Kelly
and
messages
because it doesn't
randomly,
all
that's
have to
that.
be by phone or all by email or all by text. You string all of those things together.
What do you call that? A rolling meeting?
Serial
Yeah.
meeting.
Serial.
And sometimes you don't know, like, I mean, and this has come up in a number of cases where
Right.
you call, and typically with smaller boards, because it's more dangerous that way, where this 5 it seems to be where they get in the most trouble. 2 people have the conversation, one person calls the second person, but they don't realize the second person has already had a conversation with the third person,
Right.
and it becomes this serial meeting that way.
Oh.
Can I talk to everyone as the mayor? But, yeah, right, you said yes.
You'd be helpful with that.
Right.
But you have to be careful. I mean, because if you then act as
And then I can be doing a serial meeting.
you become the hub. If you call Brandon, hey Brandon, and then you call Kelly, and then you call Angela, congratulations. This is the same idea of what happened to Seattle a few years ago. There was a head tax that passed on, it was, early, it passed on late in the day, and people were, the community got really upset about it, business got really upset about it, and then about a couple weeks later, they were dealing with this aftermath, and over the course of a weekend, there was conversations between council members and council members' staffers about, hey, if this comes up again on Monday, how are you going to vote? We need to be organized. We need to be ready for this. And so they were, and it was not just one person. It was a series of conversations. The court said, hey, we found out about it because of public records. The court said, all these records show me that there was an intent to have this meeting. Versus every once in a while it does happen, and so what you do next can matter. In San Juan Island, their planning commission, that sequential thing I identified was exactly what happened. They had 7, 2 people had a conversation, looped in a third, the third had already talked to the fourth. Then they realized they had basically dipped their toe in the quorum pool, and they backed out. The water was way too cold, they didn't do anything else. And so the court said, basically, when they realized what they'd done, there's no further action saved them because there was no intent to have a meeting. There was no intent to have this quorum conversation. And that, I think that's what differentiated Seattle. They were trying to get to the resolution versus they were just trying to have this conversation, and then they realized they found themselves in a meeting and stopped.
That's a great reminder for our city committees, that you have a space in those agendas for future agenda items.
I really like that idea. That's a great way to set the flag for the next one.
I just think that we do have, like, on our schedule, but that's where things go to die. So,
Valid.
Yes. yes.
Well, another
I'm just saying.
process too, we
Yeah.
could develop like a council referral form where it would give you all a chance to kind of frame the topic, and you could even send it to folks in advance, and then you bring it up at that part of the meeting. So people know it's coming, they're not caught off guard, they're not surprised, and people know we're gonna have a discussion about this item that this council member wants to add to a future agenda. And so we can develop a form and a process for what that looks like, and float that to you. And then that just creates a little bit more structure. It also gives staff predictability about, the framing of the issue and what the goal is behind the discussion. You can pull all that together if you'd like, and then that could be what is talked about at that.
What are your thoughts?
Just be careful about when that form gets set out, that it doesn't cause the other ones to go, oh, hey, and it's been, because.
And then we get right back into it.
Yeah, be careful with it. I mean, I like the idea of, okay, this is how you get things on the agenda, have some structure. It's always a freewheeling kind of process, depending upon what group I'm talking with, so have some structure.
One more thing to that, because I want to keep talking about them, is I'm thinking, because using technology, right? Lance left. I was going to say something about technology. Thinking about SharePoint and having OneDrive. If we use OneDrive and they'll go and then they're in comment, then that's the same thing. I'm violating OPMA because they're all in there commenting on the document.
Yeah, that's the same problem. It feels kind of like hamstringing sometimes, like completely makes it like, what do you mean we can't do this kinds of things? But it's because of the OPMA overlays as the governing body. It's supposed to happen in this forum. People are supposed to be able to see how you get from the process, because that's how we get informed. How much time do we like? How do we get there? People want to know how we got from this idea to whatever you may be deciding.
So staff, you guys use it, as a government, we used it at the Ledge, but we are employees, we're not elected. So to use SharePoint and right? And so at the staff level, I can see why she'd want to use it, but we can't use it because we're elected.
Yeah, elected, you're sitting in a different chair, and the Ledge is different too. They're not subject to the OPMA.
Right.
It's the multi-member body.
Right.
They have a completely different process when it comes to that.
Okay.
All right, well,
Interesting.
we got some direction.
Okay.
Peter and Megan, what do you think about trying the form of agenda items and topics? What do you two think? Want to try it?
I think that sounds great.
Peter, what do you think? You always have a lot of agenda items. Do you think you want to try that? Like a more formal process so it doesn't get lost in the void?
You're muted.
I'm
Peter.
sensing positive vibes from Peter.
Trying to
I think
find
this
the-
is
Yeah,
an amazing idea.
I can find my audio. So what was the question?
Peter, what do you think about, when you've had like agenda items, right? And sometimes it'd be with your committee or another committee. What do you think about just filling out a form? So there's a process for staff to see it, to figure out what to do with it, who to assign it to, and a timeline. So it's not just an ambiguous, I'd like this on agenda, but a more formal process to get agenda items. What do you think? You want to try it?
Yeah, I think the last time we had this class, we had talked along this line, right, but we just didn't do anything with it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Let's try it. Perfect.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
no, I think a lot of people get in trouble without structures
Yeah.
and without having a place to turn. It's like, well, and so I think,
Yeah, this will help us not doing emails like, hey, what about this, what about this, what about this? You can submit it to Paul.
I've talked about both of these cases. Those are the two I was talking about, just if you want to get the reference points. Just structure-wise, what you call a meeting doesn't matter. It's really about what you're trying to accomplish. You can call it coffee with the council. You can call it a regular meeting. You can call it a work group. It's all about structure, how you get there. Regular meetings are the ones that happen because it's your schedule that you adopted. Special meetings is because you have something you need to deal with. You do have the ability to have emergency meetings. There's a whole process for calling both regular meetings and special meetings that I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on. It's in the slides if you want to see it, but I know we have some limited time for this evening. But I wanted to touch on those. But the regular ones are your Tuesday evening meetings, like this, or the one you had last week. Special meetings is because on Thursday afternoon, a water main breaks and you get to authorize spending a lot of money to, fix the water main or things like that. And those are the kinds of things you do with special meetings. So you do have the ability to have emergency meetings. I've been practicing law for 30 some odd years, and I've never done an emergency meeting with any of my boards and commissions. They're very rare. What qualifies as an emergency meeting, these special meetings, would be like my water main break. If something really bad is going to happen, there's going to be substantial, like loss of property, loss of life. Economic loss is not enough. That's one of those, it's just money. It's got to meet one of those thresholds. The things that qualify, town of Mapton a few years ago burned 80% of the town in a day. That's the kind of things that qualify for this type of thing. Like I said, I've never done one, but if it does come up, you can forego some of the announcement procedures. Like I said, I'm not going to talk about them. They're what you expect 24 hours in advance. One thing I'm going to say about the agenda is this is where we've seen litigation over the last couple of years. Your agenda items need to be specific enough that people know what you're getting together to do. There was a recall petition out of Richland School District where the agenda item said local control, and even some of the council members had no idea what it was, and that led to a recall petition against 3 council members. You have to, and the more detailed you are, the more you're held to that. Walla Walla was very specific in one of their agendas, and then they did something else, and that was a violation. So your agendas do have to give enough notice that people know why you're getting together, what you're going to be dealing with, but you're going to be held to that. So keep
Morgan,
that in
can we
mind.
go back to that? Brandon, in the last meeting, you had a question about an agenda title. You wanted to ask if you could change
Correct.
the title. Do you want to ask about that?
I don't even remember what it was. It had to do with,
So there was
The
an
way
agenda
that it
item,
was
and it
worded.
was confusing, it was unclear, right? Saying something about a proposal, about saying about it's not what we're doing right, and so could we change it?
Oh,
The Salish Landing, but
it
it
was
wasn't about
it was a different phase of a project.
correct.
Yeah.
And then we didn't name that nomenclature was from Thurston County.
We had the original project name, but there had been an additional phase added to the project.
The
And that
public
was the
works.
part that was actually being taken action on. So they
Correct.
hadn't changed the name of the project. Yes, I
So-
recall that.
Yeah, the nice thing about the regular meetings, if your agenda, if you don't get it 24 hours in advance, that technical violation isn't necessarily going to be fatal, but you do need to have the agenda out. And whether it's specific enough, it's going to be very fact dependent. That's why.
But we can't change it. So if it was posted, right, and then we want to change it a couple hours before the meeting, we cannot change it a couple hours before the meeting.
I would,
We can update the agenda. I mean, basically, we would add more description. We wouldn't change the project name because that is the project name.
Okay, but we could add more to it.
We could add more descriptive
you could-
language to it. Where it's really a problem is for special meetings.
special meetings, what you say you're doing together is why you can't add things,
Right.
you can take final action on them. And in those situations, I suspect you had this conversation about, okay, if our notice was, for the regular meeting didn't get us where we needed to get in terms of notice, do we table that, bring it back for a special meeting tomorrow night? Because we do need to deal with it, it can't wait 2 weeks, and schedule a special meeting just for that and do that and correct, because if you may be able to insulate it that way, and whatnot. You do have the ability to have remote emergency meetings. This is where our legislature has done us no favors. They've used the same word twice. You can have emergency meetings if, if Mount St. Helens is blowing up, or you can have a remote emergency meeting if you can't get here. Let's say, the Deschutes River is epic flooding, it's washed out tons of bridges, you can't get through the county, it's washed out half the city. Those are the kinds of things you can have remote meetings, so that we do still have those. Basically, have some flashback moments, go back to COVID. We can go back to that if we need to. Hopefully we never go back there again. That doesn't stop what you're doing tonight, where a couple of your board members are appearing remotely. That's pursuant to your local rules. This is where I will stop. No, I'm going to talk this one in one more slide. Public attendance really is the key behind all of this, and you can't put barriers in place to people. So just think about that. You've had some really big attendance in these rooms. I know when I was last time, people were standing outside. You had you put some remote TVs up so people could hear and see what was going on. I know one jurisdiction, actually, it was such a hot topic, they adjourned that meeting to a different place, and it was the city happened to an airplane hangar, and so they actually held the whole meeting, adjourned it to the airplane hangar, and that's where they held the meeting because there was that many people.
We're gonna go see Olympic Museum now.
You can set reasonable rules. We're still seeing for it. Have your clerk, as the mayor, have a cheat sheet back here. In the case for emergency, when somebody gets on or when somebody starts being disruptive, don't give up the diet. Have a plan for dealing with that. You can have those reasonable rules. You can have people sign up to make public comment. It's not just free for all. But how you do that, I've seen some people be really creative with that one as well. But you can have some reasonable rules. Anybody have any questions? I'm at my time. So a public comment is at regular meetings at which final action is taken. The legislature crafted it that way. They put the word regular in there, not special. I don't know why. Most agencies, I'm not sure how you're doing it, at special meetings will still take public comment because it's transparency, but you're required at regular.
I have a question. If there's an individual with mental illness and they come every week with the same issue, can you curtail that individual or stop that individual from making the same public comment that you are aware of?
There is some ability to limit public comment to agenda items because it's not a public forum, it's a limited public forum. I talked with legal counsel kind of working through that process. But then you just need to be able to ready to work with the person. I'm sorry, that's not really to an agenda item, and therefore, I'm going to ask you to move on. There is a process for it, but it's one of those. Some agencies are like, it's close enough to agenda item, and we're just going to. They have 3 minutes. I'm just going to listen for 3 minutes.
Challenges are public comments for anything not related to.
Yeah.
Public hearings are different. This is just public comment at a regular meeting.
But, I mean, we could look at the council rules if you wanted to tighten the guardrails, but so far, we allow anyone to come speak about anything related to city business, not just in.
Some agencies, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just thinking about that. So we do have perimeters, like they're not supposed to talk, they're supposed to talk to all of council, not like, Kelly, I really hated what you wore at the last, or anything like personal like that. So as long as they're within those perimeters though, then we
do not interrupt.
We don't interrupt.
And the other thing comes up is they'll ask you a question, and I've worked with my boards to not engage with members because then they're adding things to the agenda item. I've seen some boards handle it very effectively, say, hey, that might be a topic for a future agenda, or hey, that relates to our fourth agenda item, as it happens tonight, or something like that. But it's supposed to be the opportunity to share information. This is something people don't understand, so this might help with instructions going in, that you're welcome to share, but, you know, we may not respond to your questions and why. So if you just kind of control the expectations, sometimes can help.
Peter,
Okay,
you have your hand up.
Sure, Peter?
Yeah, so our written public comment, and maybe I'm wrong, we collect those during the meeting, and that is that. So there's no provision for, okay, you can submit them the next day up until certain hours. What do you think how that will work?
You have your choice as to whether you want to do oral or written. You don't have to do both. Some agencies have gone to completely written comment because of some conduct in the oral part of the oral parts, and they're like, we just can't seem to get this under control, so they've gone to completely written. The one thing you have to do with written, well, you have one technical issue. Your agenda has to be out far enough in advance that they can have an opportunity to make appropriate written comment. If the agenda is posted at 4 o'clock and the meeting is the next day at 5, and you close the window for written comment at 5 o'clock the day before, congratulations, they have an hour. That's probably going to be a problem. It does create you have to get your agenda out a little bit more further in advance so people have a meaningful opportunity, I think, to get there. But then the only thing that has to happen with written comment, nobody has to read it. It just has to be distributed to you as council members, and this is where you, as the mayor, when you're doing the open colloquy, I would do, if you chose this route, be like, we received 15 pieces of written comment. Those were distributed to the council members as of noon this afternoon, and that's all you have to do.
Peter, did I answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
The only thing, I will stop. Let's make one comment about executive sessions, and that is that be careful with going into them. I always go back and read the statute at 110, subpart 1, to make sure that whatever you're doing fits within one of those allowed parameters. That's where the courts will give you no flexibility. If you're going in to discuss, because it's national security, which is, by the way, one, it really does need to be national security and not the best flavor ice cream. If it's to get advice from your attorney, it has to be you can't just bring the attorney in the room and then discuss ice cream because you'd rather talk about ice cream. It's got to be for legal advice. It's got to fit those parameters.
We won't be having an executive session on that.
Yeah. I used to represent some bigger boards, and yeah, we never did either. I've never been there. I'm disappointed.
Come on.
You guys are putting a lot out there.
So what example, like we're talking about land acquisition, we're going to use, we could say, we're thinking about this property and for use of a park, and these might be the types of things we would do there. And that's okay, but then if we started to talk about those things and how that program would be, then we're like, just trying to figure out where the gray area is.
So if you read that section, it says you can go into executive discussion to discuss the sale or purchase or lease, how it's supposed to be a transaction of a piece of property, and having that conversation in public would cost you to pay more or sell it for less. I'm paraphrasing it, that kind of a thing. That's what's allowed. Not, hey, if we buy it, we should do this. It's okay, we want to buy this property. We can spend up to $2.2 million. But you obviously don't want that conversation to be public because that's what the property owner's got to go, 2.3, versus, be able to negotiate.
But are we allowed to acknowledge like the types of things that we would do there, stack across more? That is not, it says the acquisition of property, and it doesn't say the use of property.
Right.
So I'm very strict minimal constructionist. It says acquisition. Acquisition to me is purchase.
Nothing more.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you could talk about, and you may be thinking about 4 or 5 pieces of property because you want to have a park. These are the kind of things you want to do in the park. That would be completely fine. But then we get down to the brass tacks about, okay, pieces of property, what are we willing to spend? That's where you seem to get into the acquisition of property.
But you can't talk about,
The
you're
why.
gonna, how you're gonna do it, but why we wanna buy it.
It literally says,
Why we wanna acquisition.
it doesn't say why either. It says if acquisition, when having that conversation in public would cause you to spend more. It's a really it's a tough line sometimes. But this is why talk with your attorney about each one, about, okay, what can we do, what can we not do? I've been in board meetings with some of my councils and paying attention to the conversation and be like, I'm going to advise my board now to, we might want to think about, where we're going with this conversation because we're approaching the limits of this. And it's easy to get,
So it's just strictly, hypothetically, there's a piece of property, something out there, and we're like, well, why do we want this?
We can't talk about
Can't
it.
discuss that whatsoever, it's just,
it would,
we want this, yes or no?
You're trying to establish value, and so, I mean, there's a certain amount of conversation that needs to happen to identify the property and establish the value. But you can't then, design your park.
yeah, that's a great summary, thank you, Karen, I appreciate it.
I want the bench to be.
No, but you can, like, if you're saying that there's a potential to purchase this property and, that, with the idea that it could be used for a park, you're allowed to say that? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that could be, why, what's our best use, why are we willing to pay this money, what's it worth, because it's important for the city's goal of this
Okay.
mission, that's why we're willing to overpay the property for this, I can understand that conversation.
Okay.
I'll finish with the, there is penalties if you get this wrong. Yes, it's personal penalties, $500 for knowing violations. I don't worry about those as much as I worry about the repercussions. The judge could overturn your decisions. You could basically do the third grade do-over. That's what's concerned. And you could think you've made a decision, and 6 months later, a year later, you get into litigation, and the court says, nope, you didn't do it. And so you violated OPMA enough that that decision is null and void, that contract is null and void, and then you're in limbo. Those are the kinds of things that bother me. If you think you've made a mistake.
Attorney's costs and fees.
And attorney costs and fees, that's always a fun one. Our profession is, I once had a case, we argued attorney's fees from $375 down to $350, and I called it a win. And that was 15 years ago now, so that's not gonna happen. And then, so it is something, so if you find yourself in, this is what Walla Walla did a few years ago. They thought they made a mistake, and they called the do-over themselves, walked through the process again. You can't negate the mistake, but you can insulate the decision by doing it.
So, just an example, so I know I'm clear. So say I'm at an event and Angela is there with me. And Angela and I are speaking about something that's coming up. And we think that Eileen will be the same mindset. If we talk about how we think Eileen feels about something, then we've just violated it if there's 5 of us.
If there's 5 of you, if you and Angela are just talking about Eileen, then Eileen is still out and not involved in the conversation.
But if I say to Angela, Eileen and I had this discussion, and she says that we should put the bench at this part of the park.
The fact that you had.
But if there's
five,
5,
then it
that's
would be
5.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you had the conversation with
Yep.
Eileen, not the fact that now you're
You said it out loud.
delaying.
Okay.
And it's the, you have to look at what's your group, 5, then 3 is your problem, 7, then 4 is,
Okay.
4 is that threshold. You always watch out for those lines.
Okay.
And it's whether it's written down, whether it's email, whether it's literally, let's go down to the park and have this conversation. That way there's be no record of it. That really shows an intent to violate the OPMA. But it's still if it's 5 members and 3 of you are going down to the park to have this conversation because you wanted it, that's the problem. It's the conversation. It's not the venue. It's the fact that it happened, and it just happens lots of different ways.
So I just wanted to quickly, I got several good questions after I sent out a recent handout reminder about highlights of the OPMA, and I got some really good questions back. So thank you for those of you who read it and had questions. I appreciate that. One of them that I did want to throw out was I got a question about your regional committee assignments, which was a really good one. So I just did want to remind you that most of those sub-agencies that you're assigned to also do need to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. And so the same rules that I've explained about and that you've heard tonight about your council work would also apply to those, like the, whether it's LOT or Regional Housing Committee or whatever it is, those rules still apply.
In what way?
And that those are governing bodies that are subject to the Open Public Meetings Act.
Oh, but I don't understand that.
Like Experience Olympia and beyond.
Right, I get
Well,
that,
if
but
it's
who would I
not,
talk to?
So
So I
it'll
couldn't-
depend on the makeup and whether it's created by, The ones that are created by interlocal agreements
Right.
between the.
So who couldn't, so I'm now chair of TRPC, so who couldn't I talk to?
You can't talk to anyone, I think.
I can't talk to anybody anymore. I mean, no, she just said that. But no, seriously, so
Yeah,
who
so
am I not,
So if you have,
I-
so if you have questions about your specific.
right, who am I
regional
allowed to
assignment,
talk to?
I'm happy to talk to you about
Okay.
each of those,
Okay.
because they're all structured differently.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's a really good question, and you should be aware of it,
Okay.
because that is a good apply.
You have more members on TRPC, you have
I
fewer
have a-
members on LOT.
Yeah, I
And
have
then
a
Megan has,
whole lot of people on TRPC.
But like on intercity transit, I'm alternate for their representative. So we
yeah.
can't
Oh,
talk about
yeah.
TRPC. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, no, please.
No, but seriously, this
Yeah,
gets
you have to-
really
yeah,
complicated.
It does.
I'm not talking to any of you.
Well, and then you're alternate on intercity transit apparently, so.
well, you might wanna consider,
Not,
not being an alternate.
yeah.
Megan, I see your eyebrows, that you have some, your wheels are spinning, Megan.
I was just going to say, I did have this question, so thank you for walking through it. And it's my understanding that Regional Housing Council has 5 voting members and was created by an interlocal agreement. And so what I'm taking away from this conversation is if 3 of those members have a conversation, even if it's serial, that is a violation. So that clarifies things for me.
Yep, you're exactly right.
Thank you.
You can talk to staff, you can talk to the mayor or staff, and then you can talk to whoever the staff is for those things. So if DRPC has staff, so you can talk with their staff or you can talk
Stick
with
with
them.
Max Nelly. You stick with the director, you stick with your.
But if she wanted to talk to Carolyn Cox, could she talk to Carolyn Cox at Lacey? You know, she's on the regional.
About
Carolyn?
regional housing?
Yeah.
Carolyn's a past member of the body, so
Oh,
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Great example, Eileen.
Okay. So now we've
But
identified.
no,
Now you can have coffee all the time.
But if you wanted to talk to Nick, so.
Right, but then if
Or
Nick
Robert.
talks to someone else, then you're starting a serial
No,
meeting.
seriously.
That's the piece that scares me, is you have conversation with another one of your council
Well,
members
then how are
while
you
they're here.
gonna know?
Well, it's partially it's self-policing, so you may not know that Nick, whoever Nick is, has had a conversation with Barbara, but when I walk up and say, hey, I wanted to talk to Nick about this, Nick needs to go, wait a second, and that's it. We can't do this. I've already had a conversation and not engage and say, hey, this needs to happen for this reason. You may not be aware, so let's stop here. That doesn't happen all the time.
When it gets to be serial,
Yeah.
then you stop it.
Yeah, and you can, as long as you have 3-member boards, that's why 3-member city councils are terrible. Because they're great for transparency because they can never have conversations except at city council meetings. But it's really tough to toe the line because you run into others, you're lucky to have 7 of you.
Morgan, you're so engaging that Megan has even more.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to continue that line of reasoning, one thing I heard you say before to clarify is that there has to be intent present. So if we're on a regional body and we have one conversation with one person and they don't disclose having had conversations with anyone else, and then they go and continue on and it becomes serial after us, we would not be theoretically culpable or we would be defensible because we did not engage with intent to violate the Open Public Meetings Act. Am I hearing correctly?
That's what saved the San Juan Island crew was when they realized they erred, they stopped. It does have to be a knowing violation as well. So your question posed that question when you had that conversation, whether it was a knowing violation for you was the question I would want to work through versus what happened after the fact. If you had one conversation with Nick and then Nick went and talked to everybody else, I don't know how that would play out. I would want to really dig into the knowing question.
But we don't want to spend the money on the litigation to find out.
Yep.
No, but I would have never have thought, because I'm an alternate, I never go to TRPC, but I am an alternate in
Right,
case
and I'm-
someone doesn't go.
And
so
I'm an
now,
alternate.
I would have never have thought of that.
Yeah. and
So I don't have to be an alternate.
We need to reassess our alternate assignment.
Because typically we don't need it, so.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to
Yeah.
reevaluate that. That's a really good reminder.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Megan, for asking that question. Anything else that we want to ask and then freak out about?
No, I'm gonna go home and have
Let's take a,
bad dreams
yeah,
about it.
you wanna have numbers there.
I know it's a little bit scary, but I respect it. You know, I'll give you a different analogy. When we do public records training for new employees, we do it, the shorthand for it is 15 minutes of fear. So this kind of thing, it's not to be, you know, I very rarely hear about the city of Tumwater, not in a negative way. No, in a negative way. I will tell you, I have gotten all kinds of phone calls about things that are going on in the city and things like that. But it's very rarely that I hear, you know, hey, did they do this improperly? And I think it's because of diligence. You pay attention to these, you know, and just watching it. And so when you see it, okay, we're going to stop here. But that's not always the case.
This is very timely and a great reminder for all of us. Thank you.
Well, thank you for writing it down again. And this is easy. I mean, literally, you know.
Yeah, we're all terrified. Thank you.
We will never talk to each other again.
We'll never speak to you again.
Yeah, teach other Fred Meyer gospel.
Thank you. We are now to our mayor, city administrator's report. I got nothing.
Just that, all I have is real briefly, I sent out on Friday a proposed, council calendar with, cancellation dates so we can be proactive. We're making a slight tweak to that. We'll still have the December 15th meeting, and then the December recess will start after that. Okay. So you'll still have 3 weeks between a meeting, but, we'll have the meeting on the 15th. And then also July 28th, we'll have that work session, will be a joint session, and I believe possibly a field trip. More to come on that.
We're gonna do more field trips for our work session.
So, anyway, just wanted to give you a heads up that, that'll be coming back to you on consent. So I didn't hear back from any council members about any issues, but if there were any issues with the council calendar that I sent out, let me know ASAP.
Interviews for planning commission.
Yes. Let's see, I don't have all the details on that right now, but we are interviewing for the vacant planning commission seats with, applications we have next week. The equity commission, this is on February, first review is February 20th, with the hopes of doing interviews the first week of March.
How many applicants so far?
The last I heard was 7, but that was on Friday, so I haven't heard if any came in over the weekend or the start of this week. So there were
Not bad. And it's gonna be rolling, right? So first round is February 20th.
I believe Jason's had outreach and contact with them for 20 different organizations throughout the region. So he has been very active and very proactive in terms of connecting with different folks within the community and representatives
He's been great.
organizations. So
Good.
That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need adjourned at 6:53.
Okay.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.